everyone, and welcome to Diverse Dividends, where our mission is built around one simple idea that having great conversations with great leaders in our industry can actually pay dividends in real time through career insights, industry perspective, and, of course, some practical lessons. My name is Sara Loriot, and I'm your host, and I am thrilled to be joined today by Kristina Fanjoy, Chief Financial Officer at CPP Investments. Kristina, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Sarah, I'm really excited to be here. I just want to commend you on taking the initiative to create this community amongst the finance community. Your energy about this is infectious, so I am all on board.
Thank you so much. The pleasure is mine. And honestly, I take so much joy in meeting incredible leaders like you. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
I do mean it. So as you probably understand, I've been really looking forward to this interview because I'll be honest. Of course, I'm familiar with Canada Pension Plan and CPP Investments, but it's not until I did a deeper dive that I fully appreciated the role that CPP Investments play. So as a contributor and eventually as a beneficiary, I am extremely proud to be able to sit down with Kristina today to, of course, get to know her, but to also discuss the purpose that guides CPP Investments, which is to provide a foundation for financial security in retirement for over 22 million Canadians. And so in today's episode, as always, we will go beyond the job title and get to know Kristina for who she is. So we'll explore her career journey. We'll discuss some leadership insights. We'll also see how she drives impact within an organization with such a big mission. And we'll also talk about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, which is the topic of women in finance. So with that, are you ready to get going?
Let's go.
Wonderful. So Kristina, I always like to start these interviews with understanding how you get to where you are today. So I'd love to hear about your career journey and where you started, how you ended up becoming a chief financial officer. But in that, if you could also explain to us in plain language what a chief financial officer does.
Well, thank you. You've done a great job in explaining what CPP Investments is all about. We really exist with this unique public purpose mandate to ensure the financial security, the retirement security of 22 million contributors and beneficiaries in Canada. And we do that through a professional investment management organization that right now manages $777 billion in assets. Those assets are invested across more than 50 countries. We have over 300 partners globally and a hardworking team that really wakes up every day thinking about the Canadians that we serve. Not just for you and I, but for the future generations that will come after us. So it's really an organization with a long-term horizon and mandate. And it's quite unique with that combination of having a public purpose with a commercial orientation. We are arm's length from government, independent board, but we never lose sight of our mandate to maximize returns with undue risk loss on behalf of our contributors and beneficiaries. In that context, I, as CFO, you could look at our website and see that I'm responsible for managing financial reporting and performance and tax and financial planning and all of the attributes you would normally associate with CFO position. But if you kind of break that down into its essential elements, the way I would cut through all of that is really might see my mandate as CFO of CPP Investments is twofold. One is to ensure that in our organization, which is making decisions every day in a fast-paced, complex environment, that the professionals that manage the CPP investments and the assets under management have the right information at the right time and the right insights to make the best informed decisions. And that's job one. And then the second part, critical part, is to, and as we represent the combination of those decisions to the public, to our financial results, that the public can trust the integrity of those results. And that is really important because in this mandate we have, we never lose sight of that, the public trust that we have to continue to preserve. While our mandate is written in a legislative statute, what underpins all of that is the maintenance of that public trust in what we do. So that is who I am today. That is not at all who I imagined myself to be 30 years ago. I'm a first-generation Canadian. I'm just so thankful for my parents to start their family in Canada and giving me everything that Canada has access to. I was a BCom student at U of T. When I graduated from U of T, I considered what's next. And I chose, even though we are as part of the CFA Society today, and I'm a strong believer in professional accreditation. For me, I pursued a CPA. I see there's huge value for those students that come out of university to consider whether it's some form of accreditation. It might be a PN, it might be a CFA, it might be a CPA or an MBA or CBB. But I think all of those types of professional experiences where you then have an apprenticeship in a working environment with other professionals is really a great way to launch your careers. The first 15 years of my career was in professional services. I love professional services in that it gave me access to multiple clients, and all my clients were so interesting. All the industries I was exposed to, different types of problems. So the variety of work and then honing in on developing some domain expertise in certain areas was really was my North Star. And I never thought of leaving professional services because I didn't think I could get that variety and interest of work outside of professional services. 15 years into my career in professional services, one of my former bosses who became a mentor, he had left that firm the year before to go work for some pension plan. This was like 2009 or 2008, in the midst of the financial crisis, nonetheless. Lo and behold, a year later, he gave me a call. I was just completing my second mat leave. I have two boys now, 17 and 20, and the loves of my life, in addition to my husband. So I'm surrounded by three wonderful men every day. But at the time, I was just coming back from my maternity leave, and this former boss mentor gave me a call and said, listen, I'm looking for someone to join our team. There's something special going on here, and I think you should really consider it. So, and it was one of those decisions that I made where I started with my head, and I did the classic A-type thing, the pros and cons of, I have a very good trajectory at the firm. Why would I make this move? And I did all the pros and cons and all this and all that, and then kind of put that away, and you step back at it and say, well, you know what? This is actually someone who I really trust. And if he says this is actually something special going on here, I owe it to myself to try. And the thing, once you do have that professional accreditation, the luxury is that I knew if I actually left the firm, I could always come back. So, but I probably regret not trying. So anyways, obviously I made the decision then to join CPP Investments at the time, which was maybe $100 billion in assets under management. But that was the beginning of everything that came after that in terms of building all the capabilities, the globally diverse portfolio. I've been now with CPP Investments for 16 years. I started as a single contributor. I had never managed a team before. And then within 3 years, I was then asked to take on the head of tax role in CPP Investments. While in professional services, you mentor teams, you manage teams, it's different than being a people leader. And just to fast forward a bit, in my leading a group of 10, then became leading tax and valuations and financial reporting. And with each of those incremental steps, I came to realize that I was capable of doing more. And not just more individually, it's more in terms of how I became a multiplier of impact through others.
You have provided so many great insights, and I have so many questions. We could take this conversation in so many different directions. But first, I just want to acknowledge that I just love your passion for your organization and for what you do. And in that, a few things that you said that I guess stuck with me is that, one, you left your previous career in professional services, but what I understand is that you were very open to opportunities as long as it met your value system and you felt fulfilled.
We have many success stories in Canada, and CPP Investments is one of them. And I didn't realize that not only was it an opportunity to be in an organization that is firmly rooted in serving Canadians, but it is global. And that's really what I love. There's no issue on a global basis that we're not at the rock face of, whether it's geopolitical or economic, the market volatility, talent disruption issue, opportunities and issues. We manage it all when you have that much of a global remit. So proud of, on behalf of Canadians, what we've been able to build. And it's not just this management team that I'm a part of. This is an organization that is multi-generational. So the way I think of it is that I have the privilege of serving as part of the CPP organization for this period of time.
That is absolutely incredible. And it's funny because when you first got approached to join this pension plan, only to realize just how incredible their mission was and how much it aligned with your own personal values and your own personal mission. I can relate a bit and to that simply because I work in institutional asset management. So, of course, I'm familiar with Canada Pension Plan, CPP Investments, and I know that CPP Investments is a leader. I know that we look up to them. But again, it's not until I started doing my research in Canada Pension Plan, CPP Investments, that I actually fell down a rabbit hole and ended up spending hours on end just doing research on it. And I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. And I just had this surge of pride in me to know that I have access to that as a working Canadian. And for some reason, it's something that I took for granted for all those years. I knew I had to look up to CPP just because of I'm a professional in finance, so of course I know of CPP, but I would say as a working Canadian, I didn't know as much as I ought to know, I would say.
You hit on something there because it's interesting enough. I do think our brand or reputation is actually known in global finance circles and probably less so in Main Street Canada. But actually, I think Canadians can sleep comfortably knowing that a big part of their future financial security is secure. And, it's one of the things, there's so many things that we as Canadians should be proud of. Solving this pension problem is actually something that globally people look to Canada and say, wow, they have solved it. There's a lot of countries out there with demographic situations where their policymakers have solved for yet. So there's many things that Canada should be proud of and having accomplished, but at the same time, we never take it for granted. So the world is changing. We need to make sure that in the way we manage the fund, that we are looking years ahead in terms of how we manage a portfolio to be stable, resilient in the face of all these changes that I think all of us are looking ahead and saying there's a lot of ambiguity as to, what the world will bring.
Especially if you're invested in 50 different countries.
Well, diversification, that's the beauty of diversification, as hopefully I'm sure this audience will know. Yeah.
It's part of the foundational things that we learn about finance. Remain diversified. So that's wonderful. So thank you so much for sharing your story, your career journey. I really appreciated all the details. One other thing that you said about your career journey as you progressed was being a multiplier of impact through others. I've never heard that before, but I'm somebody who's very impact oriented. So can you tell us more about what that means?
Well, that is not something I experienced or appreciated until I got more senior. And I think in the early part of my career, I would say that, I was kind of focused on, I think what propelled me was just really good execution, like just nose down, getting the job done. And that usually leads to promotions early in your career. If you get the work done and you're known for doing excellent work, then the next title comes. And then there's this point where, maybe in the middle part of your career, you realize actually, that's probably not. You start to see people around you getting promoted and you're wondering why, or if you haven't figured it out yourself, it's because the heads down, nose grinding work is not actually what employers are looking for. Let's say when you're reaching kind of the middle part of your career, what they're looking for is more potential. What is potential? Potential is actually not the work you've done, but the work you have. Are you inquisitive? Are you taking initiative? Are you connecting dots where you see risks and opportunities, identifying that, and then offering solutions, right? So it's less about what people ask you to do and more of what you see the potential of, and therefore people see potential in you. And that's probably what's going to get you to that next level of, let's say, career advancement and development. But then to get to the more senior levels, it's less than even what you can do yourself, whether it's the nose grinding or the identifying opportunities, because then the magic is what can you accomplish through others? And that's where you need to think about how do I think about not what I can do myself, but to nurture talent, to multiply the impact of your vision of leadership through others. And that's where people leadership is so important. I didn't realize, when I reflect back on my career, I didn't realize I did have the fortune at CPP Investments to practice that people leadership. And it comes through combinations on the job, formal training, seeking feedback from others. You cannot underestimate the importance in career development of actively seeking feedback, like seeking it, absorbing it, exposing yourself to both the constructive feedback and the reaffirming, keep doing what you're doing. So if I had to go back to my earlier self, I would say, get that exposure to people leadership, because then you'll be that much more comfortable and ready to be that multiplier of impact through others.
What inspired the launch of Diverse Dividends is the Women in Finance Conference organized by CFA Society Toronto. So I helped launch the event, and it was a resounding success. I think part of it is because people wanted to be able to attend such an event. But I think that we took a bit of a different spin on the event, where we made sure that we had bolder conversation, that we allow ourselves to be vulnerable on stage, but also that we included men in the conversation, right? Because ultimately, I think there's been a lot of progress for women in finance, and I know that's something that we'll be discussing today. However, a lot of the people at the top of the organizations who are perhaps most capable of influencing the culture of organizations are men. And a lot of them agree that diversity of thought, diversity of opinion, diversity in your portfolios makes sense, right? And I think that we took a bit of a different approach there. And that helps explain the success of the event. But then there was this one conversation that I had with our keynote speaker a few years ago. And that conversation was actually transformational for me. And after we had the prep call, I was like, I think we have something special here. And then I heard her speech before we had our little fireside chat on stage. And I was like, wow, this actually influenced how I'm going to start presenting myself to the public. And then following the conference, that's how Diverse Dividends was born. So in talking with the leadership at CFA Society Toronto, was like, can we do more of that and make sure that we can bring those conversations to the public? Because there's so much wisdom that can be shared.
Well, there's so many things in what you said that resonated with me in part, because I think what has an impact today is authentic leadership. And I don't think when I started that was the case. I do think when I started, people put a different face on who they were in the office versus home. But I think that people are increasingly bringing their whole selves to work. And to be quite frank, I don't have the energy to be a different person at work at home. So who I am here is who I'm at home. Probably to the chagrin of my boys, who are like, we can use a little bit less CFO at home. Especially when I talk to them about their studies, I talk about my family at work. And again, this being your whole self at work is so important. And it goes to what you just said about women in finance or diversity in general. Organizations understand that diversity drives value. You have to make sure you have an inclusive culture. And that's where authentic leadership comes in, and an inclusive culture, and practicing that and giving us each other permission to make mistakes and then learn from it and move forward.
I love that. And I agree with it. Of course, I'm nowhere near your level, but in the previous life at one of the organizations I worked for, my bubbliness was not as all accepted. And I felt like I was...
You had to be somebody else.
Exactly. And dressed in a different way, more silver collars. And that's what I was like, that is not me.
Yeah.
And then I realized that instead of changing myself, was more about, let's make sure that I find an organization where this is valued, right? Because this will just align better with me. And with your
that's an important part of what keeps people in organizations. It was obviously I love the purpose of CPP Investments, but actually it's the people. We literally have rocket scientists in the building, but we have a no ego culture. And when you combine that level of just people are smart, but they don't use it as armor. They use it to solve problems. And they also admit what they don't know. Because you could be really capable in a certain domain, but the way business problems are solved is not through solving issues in singular domains. We actually have to combine our collective insights and then figure out a problem. And the organizations that actually look at things cross-sectionally, different forms of diversity. It's not just male, female, gender diversity, physical or ethnic. It's actually, the way we're trained, the way we think. You put accountants and CFAs and engineers in a room, and together they'll probably come up with a more interesting solution than just, those individual professions or people that are cut from the same cloth. It does take more time to find solutions through diversity, but the solutions that are found are usually more robust. They're long-serving, but it's all worth it in the end.
Yeah. No, but I couldn't agree more. And as a matter of fact, for the organization that I work for right now, our president is a theoretical physicist and a mathematician.
Yeah.
And he brings a diverse opinion to the table.
Yeah.
Right? Otherwise, the team is comprised of a lot of CFA charter holders, yes, and we have a few lawyers on the team as well. But I know that whenever there's something that I'm ruminating on, and when I think I've exhausted every single option, I know that if I go to him within a few minutes, he will give me a completely different opinion, and I so appreciate that. And so let's go back to your career journey, because you said so many interesting things that I wanted to follow up on. So a question I have is, I guess, flipping the script on a question that you'll hear about a lot at conferences or interviews, which is, if you could go back 20 years and, tell your younger self something or give your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be? I want to flip the script to this question and then ask you, if you could go back 20 years or on the early stages of your career, could you tell us about one thing that you did, one achievement that you have in your books that you're proud of? Now it helped you pave the way to where you are today. It can be small or big.
I'll cite two examples. One that's maybe earlier in my career, but one, and it's small, it really kind of gave me the ambition to do more. And then more recently, prior to my CFO shift, but still kind of had impacted my thinking. Like when I was back in professional services, I, like yourself, I was thinking about an initiative to bring the different parts of the professional services firm. There was audit and tax and advisory together to, learn from each other, talk about our client experiences, create a conversational event. I think it was like breakfast or whatnot. And I mean, it's a small thing, but, after we've done a couple of those and, I got feedback that actually, this is adding value, it got me inspired just to do more like that, where I'm connecting people, connecting ideas. And it was less about what I knew, but I knew enough to know how to curate something to get people in the room with a little bit of experimentation. And that, it just inspired me to continue to do things just like what you're doing here, which is what are the opportunities to inspire ideas and cut across domains and really see the value when you bring people from different parts of problem solving together. And at the time, it was about how do we solve our clients' problems. But if we can look at it on a cross-disciplinary basis, it's like at the time, from a financial perspective, we could really differentiate ourselves from our competitors. That success I had then, taking that initiative, getting the feedback, and just inspired me to do more like that. Now, recently, when I reflect back in terms of something that was really kind of an event for many professionals, the experience through managing through COVID, I think really had a big impact. For us at CPP Investments, we have a March 31st year end. And I was not CFO at the time, I was head of finance. But when the world shut down in mid-March, we needed to publish our financial results. The markets were in turmoil. Everyone had gone home. Obviously, we, like other companies, were standing up remote work. But we were one of the first large institutional investors to publish our results after COVID. Because if you imagine, the banks have October 31st year ends, many companies have December year ends. We have this March 31st year ends. We were one of the first ones out there. We were able to get it done with the shock of everyone working from home. Not only the finance team pulled through that, but so many multidisciplinary contributions to getting the financial results. Our public affairs team, our legal team, our external auditors for the first time completely completing an audit plan. And while now we appreciate the value, the ease of remote work, back then in 2020, this was all new to everyone, but we got it done. And I reflect on that because if I think today about a problem that seems insurmountable, I know this is an organization that can get it done. And I look at examples like that and say, wow, we can do it. No matter what gets thrown at us, there will always be external shocks. And in fact, as jarring as that was in 2020, how many more significant shocks have we had since? The market volatility is something that we have been able to cut through, preserve our commitment to transparent, high integrity financial reporting, and not just in our public results, making sure, as I said earlier, that we continue to fuel the information that's needed internally to make decisions. But we built a platform that can do that. So every time I think that, geez, can we get through this? I look back at what we've been able to accomplish and I'm so proud and know this is an organization that can rise to the challenge.
And it's incredible. And I'm sure we all remember COVID like it was yesterday, or we don't because we just left it off.
But we should remember the lessons learned and the resilience that it has in our personal and professional lives, that going through an event like that has, I think so many people have been made stronger.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for that. I would like to now switch gears and discuss your circle of influence. So again, thinking about your career progression, I guess earlier you mentioned that you had a mentor who introduced you to Canada Pension Plan and CPP Investments. And I want to talk about mentors because I think that for a lot of our listeners, a lot of people in my network, there's this notion that if you want to make it easier on yourself to progress in your career, you need a mentor.
Yeah.
But I will say it firsthand, finding a mentor is not something that is accessible to everybody. Yeah. I do not have one myself, and a few reasons for it being, you need to first find the mentor, have a connection with the mentor. It's a big investment of time for both parties. I'm sure that, the mentor probably wants to learn from the mentee as well. So it's definitely a bit of a synergetic relationship. And so as I was thinking about the whole notion of mentorship, I came to the realization that what can influence your career progression goes way beyond mentorship. It could be a role model, so just someone who's done a good job. It could be a challenger. I call them challenges, but I'm referring to those people that sometimes didn't necessarily want you to go up the ladder, but by doing so, they only motivated you.
Yeah.
And so I would love to hear about your circle of influence. So right off the bat, I know that you had a mentor, but I'd love to hear about your mentor and anybody else.
I use the term mentor now, but I would encourage people to not worry about that label because I have a lot of informal mentors. I've been the beneficiary of having informal mentorships we're an organization that has a formal mentorship program. So people are asked to be mentors. Do you need a mentor? And then we have an internal matching program. So that's what I would consider formal mentorship. But my mentors or my supporters or my sponsors were never named. I never assigned them that label. I never talked to them in that way, but I found a boss. You moved on to your career, but if you have a good relationship with a former boss who knows, because they can continue to be your cheerleader or your constructive challenger. But I would stay away from the labels because sometimes, in other words, you meet someone at a conference and you say, oh, geez, can we have a coffee? Oh, can I take you to lunch? Oh, do you mind if I tell you a little bit about myself? I'm thinking about this or I'm thinking of that. And then you catch up with them a little while later. There's that for me has been what mentorship is rather than, okay, you come in and you have a meeting and say, well, these are the things I want to achieve. It's been more conversational. That's worked for me. Other people's experience different. I've worked with many bosses, partners, so I would say that I've had many bosses but I try with every person I work, whether they are my boss or around me is to observe their leadership. And then I would say I'm an amalgam of the many people I've worked for. So I'm not a replication of it. At the end of the day, you need to build something that your leadership should be authentic to you are. But I would say I've taken a piece of things that I've learned from others. Leadership is something that is practiced. As I said, I think most leaders are made, not born, but that takes reps. It's almost like going to the gym. Like if you go to a personal trainer, they need to give you that feedback. It's like, adjust here, adjust there. And then you need to practice. Those reps are really how you kind of build muscle.
You said that leaders are made, not born.
Yeah.
So I love that. I would love to hear about your leadership style, because in your role, you're responsible for sorting the retirement security for over 22 million Canadians. I know I said it in the introduction, but I need to repeat it because that is just so incredible. It is such an honorable mission. And so, with adding that responsibility, I'm wondering how that influences on your leadership style and to your decision making.
Yeah. It took me a while to come to this, but I in my current form of leadership, I appreciate that I'm not the expert. I hope that doesn't sound jarring, but as CFO, actually, I'm at the point where I'm a generalist because the domains that I'm asked to manage on behalf of the organization, valuation, financial reporting, tax, performance, financial planning, the way I manage it is making sure that I have really great people and people below them that know their area and have the leadership potential to do more. I say that in part because in the early part of my career where I was kind of growing it based on certain domain knowledge, and now that I've gone broad, I come to appreciate the value of that domain expertise. So the question is, okay, what do I bring to the table? Part of what I bring to the table is actually helping them see each other, see gaps between those domains, removing barriers and making sure they have the resources to problem solve together. There's value in sitting above the specialty. Sometimes when you're so into the weeds of something, it's hard to kind of take a step back and see the bigger picture and maybe ask questions that no one has asked me. So a lot of my job is about asking questions and also making sure that the people that were cultivating talent, not just in my directs, but a lot of the conversations I have with the leaders in finance at CPP Investments, how are you developing your next generation of talent? But in the long term, how does that person become a future leader? And maybe we need to take them outside of their comfort zone. And taking them out of their comfort zone might mean that we put them in a different role, not the one that they were maybe hired into. But then that gives them leadership opportunity and that opens their minds up to, okay, is this a person with potential and ambition to do something different? Because then the organizations that think that way and take those small calculated risks are the ones that win in the long term. Because part of my job is to make sure that there is strong succession pipeline, not just for my CFO positions, but for all the key positions in an organization. So you should know that that is on the minds of any CEO, any C-suite and what's expected of them, of their board, is actually a main part of their job is cultivating talent. So that's the secret sauce. How do you cultivate talent, nurture it, bring it into the organization? And because that is what ensures longevity in any organization.
And that is so interesting because we started the conversation talking about caring for future generations of Canadians and ensuring that they have a strong foundation for financial security and retirement. And now we're talking about future generations of leader that will help transcend that mission. So there's a bit of an intersectionality of helping out or looking after future generation.
Well, any organization that wants to be successful over the long term, that's key. And it's the talent you have. Because we're a balance sheet and the people we count. And talent is the key, especially in financial services. What drives value is the people.
I have one last question for you, Steve. And it's with a topic that I love talking about, which is the topic of women in finance. So you've mentioned that you've been in the industry for 30 years, much longer than I have. And so from that standpoint, you have had a front row seat to seeing how the industry has evolved. So from your lens, I have a three-part question, but I'd love to hear your perspective on three things. So I'll lay out the questions, but we can go one by one, of course. So one, what is the area where we've made the most progress for women in finance? Number two is what is one area where we still have work to do? And three is a bit of a twist, I would say, but what are some new dynamics that are being introduced to the younger cohort of women in finance?
Yeah. So I think for the first question, when I joined the industry, and I looked up, there was a handful of trailblazers, the women that came before me that kind of opened up the doors, but they were far and few between. Over my 30 years, I think women have permeated in many aspects of the financial industry. I still think there's more work to do, but great traction in terms of diversity. But I think the key thing for us to focus on now is, as I mentioned earlier, inclusion. So you have that form of diversity at the table, but how do you make sure that they're fully engaged, that they're sustained and cultivated through their full potential? And that, I think this is actually, that there's another form of diversity, which is more demographic too, in that, and it's not just about women, it's about men, because there's your life cycle. And there's those that are early in their careers, those that might be starting families, those that are, let's say, in the sandwich generation where they have young families and are caring for elderly. And it's maybe even less about gender in terms of where are you in your life cycle. And what we need to make sure is that we, as the best performing organizations, will be conscious of that people might be different in their personal lives or their work lives, depending on where they are in that life cycle. And this is why I love the fact that you brought men to the conversation in some of the women in finance events, is because men are experiencing some of the same issues that we as women issue, in that they are now increasingly in equal partners in child rearing, and therefore they are starting to live the experience that we as women have lived sometimes in terms of facing those trade-off decisions. This is where if people can bring their authentic selves to work, reflect who they are, the totality of who they are with the people they've worked with, their bosses, it allows for those conversations that we can all be sensitive to, that how we have to manage both aspects of our lives. So again, it comes back to what we started talking about earlier: inclusive behavior, authentic leadership that invites people to be their whole selves at work. If we continue to work on that, that'll help us even break even more barriers down. Well, and your last question, I'm trying to remember now.
Yes, right. The last question.
The pleasure.
Yes, for the younger cohort.
Early in the conversation, we talked about AI. I'm really, as I said, we're at the ground floor of what comes next. And it's actually quite the equalizer. Your ability to harness the potential of AI with, let's say, a domain expertise that you are developing. So you are, let's say, a domain expert plus because you know how to use the tools. And I'm not talking about being a coder or whatever. It's actually about understanding how you can augment your impact with now AI. Because the secret is that you could be a single contributor, but if you actually can use AI effectively, it can actually expand your impact. So I would just encourage anyone who's at the start of their career, even their mid-career, more is like lean into it. Like hopefully you're part of an organization, and I'd say I'm really proud of CPP Investments for leaning into giving these tools to all of our 2,000 colleagues to really think about the impact it can make on how we perform and deliver pension and improve net performance. But that's a huge career opportunity for them. The future of work it will not be that AI will eliminate jobs. It will be that it's a partner in actually how work gets done. So, future leaders could be leading both people and, let's say, agents, and actually maximizing the combination of both. So AI literacy, in addition to financial literacy, I'm sure a topic close to our hearts, is really going to be important to the future generation of work, I think.
I couldn't agree more. Yes. I mean, it would be impossible to have this conversation without talking about AI because it is omnipresent at this point. And I think that its presence will only continue to be felt. But with that, I know that, I'm in my position today, thanks to women like you who has paved the way to make it easier for me. So just want to say thank you for that, but also thank you so much for the work you do with ensuring that.
Well, I love I work for you, I work for your child, and just the generation that'll come. Thank you for, again, setting up this community. So it's been great.
No, wonderful. So I said I had one last question for you. However, I do have 3 rapid fire questions for you to really close off our tradition.
Okay.
So we call them dividend question because this whole conversation we hope yielded a high level of dividends to our listeners. However, those last 3 questions are meant to just meet that bit of extra visual. Okay, you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So what is one thing that you love about what you do?
I love having Canadian roots with a global front row seat.
Number 2, what is one thing that you recently changed your mind on?
I recently changed my mind on the equalizing opportunity that is AI. A couple of years ago, when it first came on the scene, I was a little bit scared that it would bias women in the workforce. And I was worried that the women in finance would be at a disadvantage if they didn't come from, let's say, a technical background. What I've come to realize, and I've seen this in my own team, it has been the equalizer because it's not about a technical competency. It's actually about initiative and trying and learning and experimentation. And that's an attribute that crosses across genders. So that's why I'm all about this being a huge equalizer in the organization for all forms of diversity to be able to show what they're capable of.
And the last question, well, actually, you've given us a lot of advice throughout this conversation, but what's one last piece of advice that you had for our listeners who are looking to grow in their careers?
Be confident to be yourself. It takes too much energy to be someone else. Take the feedback from others. Push yourself outside your comfort zone because it's in that uncomfortableness that you will actually grow, develop your own confidence, and others will actually have confidence in you.
True. It is, I'm sure confidence is contagious.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So that wraps up our conversation. Thank you so much. To everyone who listens to the conversation, I hope that you enjoyed it just as much as I did.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.